Hello, welcome to my channel, Inflightmuzik. My name is Ian, and today I'm doing a review on the new plugin from Beatskillz called Slam XL. So Slam XL is a new plugin from Beatskillz. Originally it's $149, but right now it's on sale for $79. And to be 100% candid with you, I want to let you know that I'm not getting paid for this review. So right here on the Beatskillz website, it says Slam XL is that perfect channel and bus fattener that can instantly bring your beats, keyboards, live instruments, vocals, or percussion to life without the need of chains or plugins or very complicated plugins, which take more time and are difficult to use. The easy and appealing interface of Slam XL gives you instant control over equalization, saturation, compression, limiting, and stereo expansion right out of the box from one plugin, so you don't have to reach out for other plugins or break your creative flow. This is something that I would look to if I was just starting out and I was wanting to possibly get a good mix or a good starting mix without searching for a bunch of different plugins. Even if you only have stock plugins, sometimes it's good to just have one plugin where you kind of have everything right in front of you and you just kind of go from there. So right here I have one of my mixes pulled up, and the good thing about what I'm doing here, I'm basically taking a mix, a finished beat that I've already done. On my instrument bus here, basically all I have is just a little EQ or a lot of EQ. This is pretty much what it looks like. I'm cutting out a lot of the information here. Even though I'm cutting all this out, there's still some information there. What we're gonna do is really put this plugin to the test and see if I can hear any improvement. Okay, now let's see if we can make this better than what it sounds like now. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off this parametric EQ. Another thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the master. Well, I'm not going to turn off the master, but I'm going to turn off the plugins going into the master. But I'm going to leave this filter on the mix bus so we're not getting any extra frequencies. Let's go ahead and listen to this, just the instrument bus without any effects. So there we go. So let's go ahead and try and improve that with Slam XL. So the first thing that I noticed right off the bat is that with the way that this plugin is set up, it looks like this EQ is going into the saturator, and the saturator goes into the compressor goes into the limiter, and then you can stereo expand this. And typically that's basically what I would do. If you've seen some of my previous tutorials, I pretty much use EQs to boost into my saturation. And then sometimes I might add an EQ after that and trim some of that saturation out, but that's what they have this compressor here for. Normally I don't use compression at all, but in this instance, because we don't have an EQ coming after the saturator, this compressor helped tame some of those extra harmonics that we're getting out of the saturation. And then the limiter will just top that off by acting as a makeup gain, but also the limiter will act as a limiter and chop off any of those top peaks. And then we might mess around with some stereo expansion, but if you did pretty good panning with your instruments, so this is a pretty cool tip. I mentioned this in the FL Studio 20.1 workflow tutorial that I have, but you can select unused channels, and then from there you could hit Alt and Delete to delete anything that is not being used. And then you're just left with these. So here you can see we do have some panning, but since we're just messing with the instruments right now, let me switch over to my instrument group. You can see that I have panning left and right on each of the instruments that we are still working with. And then you also have a mix knob right here. So what I recommend is actually putting this all the way to 100% to wet, and that way you could actually hear what the instrument or the effect is actually doing to the mix. And then you could back this off and bring back the dry signal after you've done all of your effects. Let's go ahead and loop this. Right now we're looping the chorus, and we're just gonna mess around with this EQ. One thing that you should keep in mind when you're using an EQ with knobs like this, pay attention to what frequencies they are actually manipulating. So right here, this is set somewhere Okay, it tells you you can bring up what frequency this is hitting just by clicking and holding. And this is at 100 hertz. This one's at 1.4 kilohertz. And this one's at 8.7. Pretty good ranges, but 100% for sure we are going to be adjusting what frequencies we're actually affecting. So let me explain what decisions I made here. So if I were to pull up this original EQ that I have, you'll see that I'm cutting everything below 238. And again, I am still getting some frequencies down here, even with this cut. So it's not like all those frequencies are eliminated, but I am drastically reducing the sounds after 248. And right here, I have a little dip. Right around 1500. That's to give the vocals some room in the future and also to let some of the percussive elements pop out a little bit. I have a little boost right around 5K. Tapers off right around 10 or 11K. Right here, I kind of mimic that. This EQ's cutting right around 146. So I'm going a little lower than what I did with this parametric EQ, and I'm just turning this down all the way. And then I'm expanding that area of where it's affecting with this knob right here. You could hear that when I boosted the Q all the way to its widest setting, I was getting even more of a cutoff than what I was getting here at 244 hertz. So this bottom area only goes up to 200 hertz. So that could be for a couple of different reasons, but overall, this is why it's important for you to use your ears instead of just going off of what you see visually going on in this EQ or going off of the numbers. Each EQ is going to respond differently. You really don't have a visual representation of what this Q setting looks like in the EQ. So at the end of the day, we're just using our ears. Overall, I do feel like we cleaned this up a little bit, just like the little dip that we have in the middle of the EQ. I have a little dip here, but this one's at closer to 2000 hertz or kilohertz, I should say. And then I have a little boost right around, or I have a pretty big boost that says 9 dB right around in between 9 and 10 kilohertz. And again, we're affecting more than just that area. We have it spread out a little bit with this Q setting. So another thing that we could do, I doubt we're going to hear too much of a difference because of how much we cut here, but we could always high pass, turn this all the way up to 100 hertz or 50 hertz or 30 hertz. Not really hearing much of a difference in any of those ranges, but I am going to go ahead and just leave this at 50 hertz because 100% for sure we don't need anything below 50 hertz. Let's just do a before and after with this EQ. So I'm going to start with it off and then we'll switch back on. So yeah, for sure it gets brighter, but it's also getting thinner. And that's where the saturation should come in. We're just going to go through these different types of saturation, and I'm just going to put this halfway. And let's take a listen to what this can do. Three sounds pretty good. 3 sounds perfect, and that's right around halfway. So let's go ahead and crank this up all the way and then just back it off. So I like it right around 70%. 71% sounds pretty much perfect to me. And so now we have those extra harmonics going in. So that makes up for the thinness that we're getting from our EQ. So that's something to keep in mind. Like when you're making decisions in a plugin, remember that you have other tools available, especially, and that's what I was saying is so good about a plugin like this that has everything here in front of you. You know that you can add in extra harmonics after you take out these unneeded frequencies. Another thing that we're doing is boosting these high-end frequencies, knowing that we really like those, and then we're getting extra saturation off of those frequencies and less saturation off of these lower frequencies that we really don't want. As I've mentioned before, I don't really use compression, but let's go ahead and see what this compression does to this chain that we have so far. So I'm just going to turn this on and off as is and loop the beat. So one of the most important things that you want to do while you're adjusting your compressor is just pay attention to the gain reduction, which was this signal that we're getting here. And if you've seen some of my previous tutorials, I mentioned that when you're using virtual instruments, meaning instruments where you that you're using inside of your DAW, where you can control the volume envelopes and control the velocities and all that, really, you already have so much control over the dynamics. You typically don't need a lot of compression. So what we're doing here is paying attention to the gain reduction, and it's just flashing on and off. And that's how we know we're not overdoing the compression, but we're still getting everything to pop out just a little bit, move forward a little bit. But again, when you're just making a beat, it's not entirely necessary to even take that step. I would leave that up to the actual mix engineer that's going to mix the beat and let them bring it more forward or compress it in the way that really complements the vocals. Because until you hear the vocals on the beat, you're really not going to be sure how much of the taming you'll have to do with the dynamics of the beat itself. That's why I typically won't do any compression. But if I do use compression on a bus track like my instrument track, it would look something more like this, with a fast enough attack to where it's actually affecting the peaks of the beat, and a fast enough release so that the volume comes back more naturally instead of getting the pumping sound. If I were to increase this release and have it have a much slower release and that compressor stays active for too long, you'll hear the pumping effect. Now let's just turn on the limiter and see if we can catch any extra peaks or any extra dynamics that might be bothering us, and we might not even realize it. So let's just do the on-off test. Actually, let's do the on-off test with the compressor first. Okay, so what I'm hearing is with the compressor off, you get a little bit more openness, which makes sense because a compressor is literally collapsing the dynamics of the sound, which again can be a good thing, especially with recorded instruments, anything that's really dynamic like vocals. But overall, it's really just bringing the sound together, and it's literally making it smaller, more compact, more put together. That could be a good thing, especially with after we balance the volume here. We also have this mix knob, which I will be utilizing later. So I'm keeping this entire chain in mind, knowing that this isn't the final sound. So let's go ahead and go with that. Let's use that compressor as is. And now let's just mess around with this limiter. So there I was just level matching, and with it pretty much level matched, the limiter is making everything louder. So if I were to turn off this compressor and limiter and then try and flip those back on, we should get about the same volume overall. So yeah, the limiter is really doing its job with the compressor kind of making everything smaller, but still bringing everything forward. The limiter really tops that off, getting rid of any of the extra peaking elements and bringing everything up in level while still getting about the same volume. Let's actually pay attention to the meter here and see what the meter's telling us. So we're a little bit below -18, and then with this, maybe a hair louder, just a little, but we're still a little bit below -18. So we did that first with our ears, and we used our eyes second. Our eyes would tell us to maybe lower this limiter even a little bit more, but overall, I'm liking the sound of our instrument bus right now. And also, if you've downloaded my FL Studio template, you would know that all of these levels of these buses get rebalanced later on, as you can see here. So now let's take a listen to this stereo expander. Right here it says C1 and C2. These are your frequency ranges. So right here it's at 141 hertz. So everything below 141 hertz, this is being affected by this knob right here. And everything above 141 and in between 4.4, 4.5K, that's what this is affecting. And then everything above 4.5K, that's what this knob is affecting. So right now I actually like those ranges. So what I'm going to do, typically with stereo information, you'd want your low end to be mono, and then as you go up, it usually sounds pretty nice to spread the higher frequencies. But sometimes it might sound good to spread the mid frequencies, especially when you have something that might be in the way of vocals. So let's just go ahead and take a listen to what this sounds like as I adjust these knobs. That sounds pretty amazing, actually. Say, for example, if you're using stock stereo imaging in FL, like any of the fruity stereo imaging in FL Studio, you don't have control over this low, mid, high. You would have to create a plugin chain within Patcher in order to get this. So this is really nice right here, to be able to kind of monoize, if that's even a word, but to make the lows more mono and then the mids and the highs more stereo. But this really sounded great. But to really put this to the test, and let's mono the instrument bus and see if we lose anything turning this on or off. So we're going to start with it off, and then I'm going to turn it on and just compare the two. That's perfect. So you always want to do that mono test after you use anything that has that's adding more stereo information, because you want to make sure that you're not pushing things so out of the way of the mid signal that you're no longer hearing it on the mono setting. So I'm going to just play this on mono, and then I'm just going to quickly switch this over to stereo, and you could listen to how open all this gets all of a sudden, but it still sounds pretty good in mono as well. Yeah, anytime you can get that much stereo information and still be able to collapse that to mono and not really lose anything, that's a good stereo imaging plugin for sure. So I would even say that this section alone, if they were to sell this as a plugin by itself for like, let's see, this plugin right now is on sale for 80 bucks. So if they were to sell this for like 20 or 30 bucks, I think that would be a good move, just to have their own stereo imaging algorithm, because every plugin does it differently. So this is even different than the S1 from Waves. The S1, you don't really have individual control over each of these areas. The closest thing that I could come up with off the top of my head where you can control all these at the same time would be the mastering plugin Ozone with their stereo imaging feature. They did release a free version of that, but that one's more closer to the Waves plugin. So you don't actually have individual control over this low, mid, and high. It's more just general stereo imaging, which is really unfortunate. Which is why I'm definitely saying Beatskillz came out with this. I think it would sell really good, because this is what a lot of people are missing. And in FL Studio, you would have to make a really annoying plugin chain in order to get this effect. But yeah, that's pretty solid right there. All right, so now we just have the input and output, so we could drive this into the signal harder and just duck this down a little bit. I'm just gonna leave this alone, because I could already tell you that the levels that we're getting is pretty much on point. But what we are gonna do is mess around with this mix knob and just listen to what we come up with when we go 50% versus 100%, and then just compare. So right around somewhere in between 40, 45, 50%. I actually like that sound. Anytime you're messing with a huge chain of plugins like this, like a channel strip, it's really nice to have this mix knob, because more often than not, especially when you're first starting out, you'll go a little overboard with these effects. And just having that mix knob right there to turn all of what you've done down, just to tone it, you'll still get all that good stuff that you got from those effects and still have the original mix intact. So let's just do a on-off with Slam XL with this exact dry wet setting and compare the two. And let's hear if we hear improvement. So yeah, that's pretty great. What we did, what I was trying to highlight, I didn't want to talk over the comparison that we were doing, but we basically were turning off Slam XL, and we were hitting right around 21, negative 21, and then with it on, it was still hitting around negative 21, but we still heard a big difference in the overall mix. And what I was hearing was more openness, more clarity, just a stronger signal overall. And we were still hitting about the same volume. I'm sure that would translate different with LUFS, but in terms of peak, which is pretty important in the individual sounds in the buses, we're not doing anything crazy that's going to really affect the mix bus or your master bus in terms of how you affect. Maybe you have more compression, maybe you have a limiter, but nothing's going to be driving that wild. And man, I gotta tell you, I really do like the sound that we're getting from this plugin. Right now, I'm about to do a really unfair test, which is comparing Fruity Parametric EQ, just my EQ setting, to the Slam XL setting. Yeah, we're competing an EQ up against stereo imaging, saturation, compression, and limiting. So this should just blow my original EQ out of the water. Yeah, man, that's pretty darn good. Another thing that I'm noticing with the EQ setting, I took out a lot of the low elements here, and I did the same exact thing with Slam XL. One of the big differences is that the lowest elements of the Slam XL version, I'm hearing a nice little punch on those lower frequencies, on the frequencies that we still have left, and that's 100% from this saturation and this compressor, because the saturation's adding harmonics from that point, and we're taming all of those frequencies and kind of gluing them together, making them stronger, bringing them out forward with the compressor. So now let's go ahead and listen to this drum bus with this bass bus. Yeah, I'm going to play the chorus without Slam XL, and then I'll go ahead and turn Slam XL on and see how much brighter and open everything gets. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. If you can't tell, this is literally, like, for all my plugin reviews, I'm going to go into these blind, so it's not like I really messed around with this plugin at all. I will say this: I did make a kick with Slam XL just to get used to the navigation around this plugin. But other than that, this is the first time that I used it as it was intended for it to be used. So this is just me going off the top of my head, just listening to what this plugin is capable of. I hate to give the very first plugin that I've reviewed a very high rating. Maybe it was because of my expectations. I honestly wasn't expecting this to be as good as it is, but this is definitely as good as it is. It's let's take a look at that price tag again though. I think it said 140 or 150 at its normal price. Yeah, so 150 at its normal price. Do I see myself spending 150 on this plugin? That's kind of tough to say, because then you start getting into the range of plugins like Ozone, pretty much the top of the line channel strips. But I'd say at $80, this is well worth it for sure. And I'm not even saying that the 150 isn't worth it. I'm just pointing out that they would be competing with what is already known to be the best. I'm not sure if that's without the right marketing that they would be able to really compete with that. Plus, another thing that would give them a disadvantage is the look of the plugin itself. You don't have all the different visual aspects of, say, an ozone or a neutron, and people are into that, even though you should be using your ears instead. But overall, there's just a lot more control that you have with those plugins, even despite the visualization. Like the EQ in ozone or neutron is a lot more fine-tuned than just the 3 knobs that you have here. And even their stereo imaging, everyone knows that you definitely have more than 3 sections. Is more than 3 sections necessary though? No, absolutely not. I'd actually recommend that you only use 3. Have your low, mid, and highs. That way you're not getting any extra phase issues or just going overboard with the stereo imaging. I would say that this this would be a really good move for Beatskillz, is to take whatever algorithm that they're using for the stereo expander and selling that for sure. I actually did like the sound of this limiter as well. Just the 1 knob feature is great for a limiter. That's all a limiter really should have to be. Not really worrying about release settings or anything like that. Just a 1 knob, because this was a pretty good sounding limiter. I think they know that. That's why it is just 1 knob. I would give this plugin a 8 out of 10. I would just take off those 2 points for, I guess, the original price tag, it being $150. I don't think it really will compete with the other plugins that are around that price and not have the other features that those plugins have, like being able to rearrange the different sections, changing the order. Maybe you want saturation before your EQ. Maybe you want saturation after your compressor and then use your limiter to tame the saturation. Maybe you want stereo imaging first. Yeah, so the price, the lack of visual features, the type of EQ that this is, more of a traditional 3 knob EQ instead of a parametric EQ. If this was a parametric EQ, this would probably go up an additional point, I would say, or at least a half a point. For me, it's really rare that I would give a plugin a rating that is that high right off the bat from a first use. I just felt like each of these sections sounded really good and it added something to the mix. And then we just backed everything off with this dry wet knob. So is it worth the $79? Absolutely. I think this plugin is really easy to use and it sounds really good. So it's kind of hard to give a plugin like that anything lower than an 8. Yeah, check out Beatskillz website. Again, I didn't get paid to do this plugin review, so I don't have any affiliate links or anything like that. Just go ahead and go over to Beatskillz, check out their website. They have other products available, but I do believe that the Slam XL is their marquee product. So yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If there is other plugins that you want me to review that you have questions about, let me know in the comments below. I'll reach out to those companies and see if they would like me to do a review. Even if not, I could always just download the demo and just do a review off of the demo. Let me know down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.